feel like every time I make a video, my background is getting messier and messier. Bear with me, I'm painting. It'll get fixed at some point and we'll actually have a nice set to work with. I want to talk about Australia and Iran, or our role in what happened with the US and Israel attacking Iran. I'm not really sure Australia knows who it wants to be when it comes to our role on the world stage. Historically, we have allied with the West. That has made sense for us. But also, we're a mishmash of different cultures with good relationships with our Asian neighbors. We don't really know who we are in the world. We're this middle power, but we don't really have much power at all, aside from our relationship with, Britain or the United States. For better or for worse, when conflicts happen, we are right behind the United States. Famously, John Howard was in the United States during 9/11, and we pledged our support to them before he even left the country. When the United States said that there were weapons of mass destruction, we followed them right into battle. And one of the United States' most important intelligence facilities, Pine Gap, is right here in Australia. When they say jump, we don't just say how high, we beg to do it again, just to make them happy. Israel, with support from the United States, has again escalated conflict in the Middle East. And although we don't exactly know to what degree Australia was involved, with our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese saying that was a unilateral decision by the United States, we can make a very educated guess that part of this was facilitated by the intelligence collected at Pine Gap. This is not likely the beginning of World War III, and I think a lot of the people who are saying that are fear-mongering to get clicks and attention. This is an incredibly complex situation, and anyone who is telling you otherwise is selling you a narrative. I don't know what's going to happen. But what I do know is this is one of many signs of an incredibly tense global situation impacting every country in the world. And I think it's important to understand who Australia wants to be. And right now, I don't think we know that. And actions have consequences. And I worry that Australia is committing itself to actions without preparing for what that might mean in the future. Here's a very brief timeline of events. On the 12th of June 2025, a United Nations watchdog revealed that Iran is not complying with nuclear safeguards, with inspectors unable to determine whether Iran's nuclear program was exclusively peaceful, with Iran reaching 60% enriched uranium. Whilst this is still well below the 90% required for a nuclear weapon, it is well above the 3.76% agreed to under the nuclear safeguard. Keep in mind that this nuclear safeguard is based off the terms of the 2015 nuclear deal, which the United States under Donald Trump removed itself from in 2018. The following day, on Friday the 13th of June, Israel engages in Operation Rising Lion, attacking military sites in Iran, with Benjamin Netanyahu justifying the attacks by arguing Iran was moments away from constructing a nuclear bomb, despite, again, the International Atomic Energy Agency only finding 60% enriched uranium. Over the next few days, hundreds of innocent lives are lost, with their leaders obviously unscathed. Netanyahu makes threats about killing Iran's leader, the Ayatollah, with Trump vetoing the decision and dropping a tweet that reads like a talk from a COD lobby. And on the 22nd of June 2025, we all found out that Donald Trump and the United States had bombed 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, officially involving the United States in the conflict. Most importantly, it does not seem to be the case that these bombings even hit the potentially enriched uranium. Iran's leader went into hiding, probably rightfully so, fearing an assassination, and as such, peace talks between the nations were incredibly difficult to facilitate. Trump at one point claimed a ceasefire had been reached, but Iran outright rejected that with attacks on United States military bases in the region, and Trump responding with this now infamous clip.
You know what, we basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
As of the 24th of June, an official ceasefire is in place, with the ceasefire still holding at the time of making this video. But on the 30th of June, according to the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog, Iran could resume producing enriched uranium within months. The worst case scenario for the United States, and ultimately Australia as well, is boots on the ground. All that would mean is more innocent men and women dying, and it's a lot harder to stop a war once you've got soldiers in a foreign nation. Iran obviously had to engage in some form of retaliatory action, but they don't really have the capacity to meaningfully harm Israel or the United States. The typical proxies used in the region, Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis, are on their last legs due to Israel's wars in the region over the past 18 months. Typically, we would also have to worry about Iranian allies getting involved, but China and Russia are seemingly unwilling, or in Russia's case, unable, to fund or assist Iran due to the war in Ukraine. Arguably, the most important thing we should be turning our eyes towards to determine whether this conflict will escalate is the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait, and if Iran blocks it off, not only do oil prices skyrocket globally, but China, a huge destination for the oil, necessarily has to become involved. Their involvement is what could escalate this conflict and potentially lead to a proxy war between China and the United States. The right to self-defense is really what a lot of this can come down to. Wherever you fall on the issue, whether you think it was justified or unjustified, we can't really understand this in terms of legal or illegal. It's a lot more complex than that. Each nation has a complex cultural and strategic goal, and you might not believe that they're equal or justified, but I think let's at least try and understand them. From Iran's perspective, why shouldn't it be allowed to defend itself against an aggressor who is already in possession of nuclear weapons? Historically, there's been significant attention and attempted control over their oil industry, with Western nations having an incentive to ensure the region is destabilized and potentially accessible through Israel. Iran, as a leader in the region, would gain significant support and power being able to stand up against Israel. The thing is, though, Iran is more so playing the role of a leader rather than actually being one. Their response to Israel and the US was more so a sign to other figures in the region that they aren't taking this lying down, when the reality is, they kinda have to. They provided ample warning to Israel and the US before their attacks and used drones that were easily detectable and could be destroyed with minimal effort. Iran does not want war, and it knows it could not beat Israel or the United States if there was one. Iran wants to be seen as a leader in this resistant axis amongst nations that have not normalized relations with Israel. It's less about self-defense or caring about Palestine, and more so about consolidating power and the Ayatollah himself still being seen as a strong leader. From Israel's perspective, they are surrounded by neighbors who engage in horrific human rights atrocities, have the stated aim of destroying them, with global organizations like the United Nations, ICC, or ICJ having no real authority over these nations that wish them harm, and Israel is safest showing peace through force. Israel has watched these nations commit horrific atrocities, and yet they have been sanctioned more times by these organizations than their enemies because they are not signatories or recognized nations or groups, with humanitarian groups like Amnesty International cherry-picking information to showcase a particular narrative. When neighboring nations like Jordan or Egypt do minimal work to provide humanitarian aid and are seemingly absolved of responsibility, why must Israel take all responsibility? When almost no other nation is in Israel's position and they have been able to maintain some level of peace with a few of their neighbors by winning wars and showing that if a war happens, they will win, why should they not preemptively strike if one of their adversaries potentially holds the means to eradicate them? Israel does, however, have a huge incentive to bring the United States into this war, knowing that they are reliant on the US support for a total victory, and a weaker Iran means more control over the region, and that's a huge benefit to Netanyahu, who is losing support and power in Israel due to his inability to actually protect them. That the longer this war goes on, the stronger Netanyahu becomes. It isn't all about bringing the hostages home or having the moral authority. It is about consolidating power, very similarly to the Ayatollah. Now that we know what happened and the general zeitgeist amongst these countries, let's look at the potential justifications people are trying to argue. A lot of commenters seem to be focusing on Iran's horrific human rights record and trying to justify that they should never be able to have a nuclear weapon because they would use it to eradicate Israel or their enemies. In these people's minds, they are immoral and can't be trusted according to Western standards, and they need to be stopped at all costs. And it is true that if you look at Iran's history, they have done some horrific things to their civilian population, that these leaders seem to be in it only to consolidate power and enrich themselves. But even if all of that was true, was this the right step for the US or Israel to be taking? And further to that, should Australia be involved in any capacity whatsoever? I'm not sure I have the right answer, but let's just lay it out for a second. Yes, it is the case we have heard over and over again from Israel that Iran is about to build a nuclear weapon, but nothing happens until it does. And in the same way we've heard Elon Musk talk about robo-taxis for years, eventually that did stop being a lie. With enough time, a lie or paranoia can become the truth. Now, in my opinion, nuclear weapons are horrible creations, and the world would probably be a better place if we never had them at all. I think that's pretty reasonable. Given, though, that we do have nuclear weapons, we should rightfully strive to ensure that at the bare minimum, more are not created due to the potential risks that come with owning them. Ideally, no one would have them full stop, but we don't live in an ideal world. So all we can do is stop the creation of more of them. It would be a potential worldwide catastrophe for the leaders of Iran to have access to nuclear weapons. And I think 99% of reasonable people would agree with that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. So, here's the crux of the issue. Given that peace initiatives have not worked, what is the next appropriate course of action? Just because Iran does not currently possess 90% enriched uranium, does that mean it's wrong to use force to stop them reaching that point? At what percentage of enriched uranium should Iran be stopped? It can't be after the weapon is already made, because then that weapon is a deterrent in and of itself. So, when should intervention occur? Because either Iran stops enriching uranium on its own, either through peace initiatives or independent decision-making, it's allowed to build the nuclear weapon, or it's stopped by force. What do you do here? To those who agree that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, but believe that this was the wrong course of action, I ask you genuinely, what do you think should have been done instead? Because I don't have an answer. So with all of that said, what type of nation does Australia want to be? The number one victims of war are the innocent men, women, and children who are killed in the crossfire. And that's already happening in the Middle East, infinitely more than it should. Sometimes war can be necessary. But do we think this is one of those times? And even if it was, should Australia be involved or complicit in that civilian death? Let's even say that Iran does plan to have 90% enriched uranium. Okay, so you bomb the facilities and storage. You might hit the facilities, you might hit the storage, or ideally, I guess you hit both. If you hit both, what's the plan to stop them starting up again? Do you just keep bombing them every time they get close? If you only hit the facilities, was there enough damage to actually stop them? If there was, how do you stop them from building again? If there wasn't, do you just keep bombing until there is enough damage? If you miss the storage, do you continue bombing until you hit the storage then? If you only hit the storage, then we go back to just bombing the facilities, right? How do you even know you actually got the enriched uranium? And even if you hit both, how do you stop them from starting up again? And if you hit both but didn't destroy either, doesn't that just reinforce to Iran they need nuclear weapons to discourage these types of attacks continuing? If the bombing doesn't work and they ramp up production, are you forced to put boots on the ground? Or do you just give up? Where does it end? Regime change? Historically, that's been a failure. I don't think countries can just bomb their way out of these problems. Do we want to be a nation who once again is just throwing men and women to die in the Middle East? You might think it's necessary and moral, but even still, does Australia need to be involved in a conflict that really has nothing to do with us and is only going to result in innocent men and women dying? How can we justify that? Being involved again in one of these potentially never-ending wars. I want to be explicitly clear. I don't think Iran should have nuclear weapons, and I don't think self-determination extends to building weapons of mass destruction that could potentially be used to genocide your enemies in the region. But with all of that said, Was this the right thing to do? Should Australia assist in the bombing of countries that lead to civilian death? And I understand that some people are going to say the most amount of civilian deaths is going to come if Iran possesses a nuclear weapon. But even still, I'm not sure how I feel about that ends justifying the means argument. These are real people. They're not just numbers. And as someone who had to think a lot about how they were covering the Israel-Palestinian conflict and probably got too focused on simply the number, these are people. And every time you bomb a nation, whether you think you have the moral authority, you're killing another human being. And some people will dunk on that idea of just, oh, so it's the classic leftist war is bad because death argument. But I think, yeah, war is bad because people are dying. Human beings are dying. And I'm not sure that in this case, those deaths are entirely justifiable. This is an incredibly complex issue, and keep in mind, if anyone ever tries to sell it to you as simple as, legal or illegal, right or wrong, occupied and occupier, they're likely selling you a narrative. And I think you should question why. Because this isn't as simple as Iran bad or Israel good, Iran bad. This has been a conflict spanning decades, if not centuries, arguably. I don't know what the right course of action is, but it doesn't feel like it was this. And I don't like that Australia seemingly facilitated it. But hey, come join the Discord, come talk about it, come say hi, come let me know what you think in the comments. It's been real.